as well as turn off your screen so that we can just see the speakers. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat room. First of all, thank you so much for everybody taking time out of your busy day to be with us. I want to first thank Senator Hughes. I understand that Congressman Evans was pulled together with a meeting with Nancy Pelosi and some other folks. So we have his chief of staff, Anuj Gupta, who is absolutely amazing. So thank you for stepping in. The purpose of this call, of this webinar, is to really take time so that Anu and Senator Hughes, and I'll do a little piece on small business, can update us on the $900 billion federal stimulus bill. As you know, it took a lot of negotiating between the House and the staff. We are grateful it is finally passed. Mr. Gupta, I would ask you to tell Congressman Evans, thank you for that vote. And with that, what I'll do is after I give some time here for Senator Hughes to make some comments or for you to make some comments anew, we have about 8 important issues that you selected that is really pertinent to the Philadelphia region that we would like to go over. So I'll move us pretty much through those because the people that are on here really want to hear about all of these, some type of update or whatever information you have. I'll take time towards the end or somewhere in the middle to talk about the PPP program. And so with that, Senator Hughes, may I turn it over to you for any comments?
Sure, Andrea, and thank you very much for not letting any grass grow underneath your feet or the feet of the Urban League of Philadelphia with respect to trying to inform folks about how this money is going to be spent. The majority of this conversation, I think, is going to lay with Anuj because it's federal money, and we've been working with his office. He's provided us some very good information in terms of how the legislation was written, and in many respects, the guidelines that were established of how the money is going to be spent. Some of those guidelines are already in place. Some were waiting to be developed because that's just how what we found from our side at the state level, how the federal folks work. And that's quite frankly, that's usually the case in most situations. You know, the appropriators figure out, and then they'll need some extra time to try to figure out some of the details and what they call guidance. What we had last in 2020 was an appropriation that was done, several appropriations that were done earlier in the year, but we needed certain guidances to come out from the federal government to give us at the state level some kind of direction in terms of how those dollars could be spent, okay? What I want folks to know is that we have a very effective relationship with the Congressman's office and with Senator Casey's office. All right, very effective relationship. Communicate a lot on these matters, and from what we can determine early on, that it appears that the federal government has learned some things from what it is that we did here in Pennsylvania specifically in how we utilized our CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, to distribute dollars to small, neighborhood-based and historically disadvantaged businesses. The program that was developed to drive out grants, not loans. You'll hear me say that phrase a lot. To many of our businesses was run through the CDFIs, through the work that we did based on guidances that came from the federal government. It appears from what we can see is that the congressman and his team, Senator Casey and his team, picked up on that, all right? And it appears that they've tried to utilize the CDFIs and minority serving institutions, financial institutions at a higher level and give them more standing in this round of funding so that there's more dollars available through those institutions, which invariably will wind up, hopefully prayerfully, in our businesses and our communities. So Andrea, this is what I interpret this.
Yeah.
Is, and working with the governor's office as well, is some of this is a work in progress, okay? There's some things that we know with more clarity and more surety than others. We know, for example, that there's $852 million targeted towards Pennsylvania to deal with the issue of rental and evictions, to provide support for families to deal with, prevent them from being evicted. That is some crystal information that we're clear on. We have some idea of what some of our higher education institutions will be receiving in direct assistance. And that just kind of arrived like within the last 2 hours. There's other stuff that we're going to need more clarity on, but fortunately we have a very good working relationship between our office, the Congressman's office, Senator Casey's office, to kind of interpret all of this. And of course, what we know, you will know as soon as it becomes clear. So I'll just leave it right there. Okay.
Anu, any comments from the beginning, and then maybe we'll bear down a little bit more on some of the other priorities?
Sure. Well, let me start out by thanking you, Andrea, and the Senator, not just for organizing today's session, but for the leadership that you have provided throughout this extraordinary last 10, 11 months. I speak for the Congressman that he really appreciates it, and we're all in this together. And I also want to express his regrets for not being able to participate today. That was fully his intention. I'm going to say this politely, but there are a lot of games being played with basic principles of democracy this week. And as a consequence, it's throwing the House calendar into disarray. So we will get through it, but it's creating some variability in his schedule. So he apologizes. Let me say this about the package. The Congressman voted for it and he supports it. But he fully recognizes that this is not enough. And he went into that vote with eyes wide open on that issue. But we are at a position right now, after 10 months of a pandemic, where lives are on the precipice, businesses are on the precipice. And to say that we are going to hold out and hope for a better package once Joe Biden and Kamala Harris occupy the White House, we would have seen an economic collapse beyond anything we could imagine. We would have seen an eviction crisis like anything beyond what we could imagine. And so the Congressman's position on this is, let's take what we could get. And the package does provide resources for some critical areas, like housing, as the Senator mentioned, like small business support, like additional unemployment, like support for our healthcare institutions. And on January 20th, no matter what they try and do this week, we will have a new president of the United States. And as soon as that day comes, there will be a discussion that starts for what else we need to move forward. Not just to survive the remainder of the pandemic, but as the Vice President likes to say, to build back better. So there's been a fair amount of criticism of the package, that it is insufficient. The Congressman went into that vote fully acknowledging that it is not enough. It is a bridge to a further investment in our communities and in our future. And that bridge will help us get there.
Hey, Andrea. Andrea.
There you go. I'm sorry.
Andrea, just to build off what Anuj said, and he's exactly correct. And the Congressman understands this is a bridge. I think the president-elect and the vice president-elect have both publicly said that this is a bridge, right? I think we've heard Anuj, them both say that, okay? Speaker Pelosi has said this is a bridge. You know, I'm a talk it into or pray it into existence. Majority Leader Schumer, okay, has said this is a bridge. All right. So we got to take this, make it work. We also have to figure out what the state can do, okay, because the state has responsibility to help its people as well. All right. And then collectively use our best experiences to inform 12:00, everybody put on their calendar, 12:01 p.m. on January 20th. Put that on your calendar, okay? All right? I know Anuj has already got it locked in his calendar, all right? This I know, okay? But 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, okay? Lock that in, because, you know, that's when the cavalry comes. Dun, 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 dun. Music and everything. Okay, I'm sorry, Andrea.
Okay, no, I'm with you. In fact, you just answered, Senator Hughes, one of the questions that was submitted was, here's the exact question. It was asking whether or not when Joe Biden takes office, can we expect more stimulus money? So I think you really answered that. Okay. So let's talk just a couple of topics, and it's up for either one of you. Let's talk about health and vaccines. What was in the package regarding health and vaccines? That is something that is on everybody's mind every day. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What was in the stimulus bill?
Anuj, is federal money. You want to start?
Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry, I was getting a message saying I couldn't unmute myself.
Okay.
So couple of significant investments in both healthcare as well as what we need for immediate COVID relief. There is about 22 billion in additional testing and surveillance contract tracing money. It's probably still not enough, but again, we've got to look at this as how do we get through the next several months and then move on beyond that. There's another 9 billion for vaccine distribution. As you've seen Operation Warp Speed, while I think we can commend the effort for the speed at which the vaccine was developed, it has not been operating at warp speed in getting the vaccine out the door. We are far off from that 20 million projection of individuals that were supposed to have received the vaccine by year's end. As of yesterday, we had just reached 4 million. So we've got a long ways to go. The incoming Surgeon General is now saying that the initial projections that we might reach herd immunity by May or June, based on the sluggish pace of distribution to date, he has now been pushing that back into July or August. Hopefully, once the Biden-Harris administration starts, we'll be able to speed things up and catch up time that has been lost. But there's one other important part of the healthcare investment here, which is another additional $3 billion in operating support for healthcare institutions. Congressman Evans has been adamant since before the pandemic starts that we do not see any more critical safety net healthcare institution closures like we saw with Hahnemann. And for a variety of reasons, unrelated to the pandemic, we have had fiscal forces working against critical care institutions like that. Now that we have the pandemic upon us, we cannot afford to lose another one. And we know the fiscal distress that these institutions have been under since the pandemic began. Early on the pandemic, for the right reasons, many of them had to postpone elective surgeries and elective procedures. That's where a good bulk of their revenue is generated from. So institutions like Einstein, like Tower Health, even the big ones like Penn and Jefferson, they are seeing very significant fiscal losses And this bill will help band-aid some of that so they can continue to operate and provide critical healthcare access during the course of the pandemic.
Thank you. That's pretty thorough. I'm going to steal from Senator Hughes when he had many of us on in the middle of the COVID, and we were talking about testing and tracing. So I hope that 22 million that you were talking about here in Pennsylvania will absolutely go to people who look like me, who are trusted messengers with a trusted message. I've been talking to Dr. Stanford a lot. And even when you look like the community that you are servicing, people are sometimes reluctant to give information. So I hope as we allocate those funds that there are people who are Black and brown people who have an opportunity to apply for those funds. Thank you, Anu. That's extremely helpful.
Andrea, if I could actually answer to that point, within those two buckets, the 22 billion for testing and tracing, there is at least a set aside of 2.5 billion for underserved populations. And on the same with the vaccine distribution, within the 9 billion that has been allotted for that, there is at least a targeted investment of 300 million just for underserved communities. So again, not enough, but there is a recognition in this package that there are inequities and disparities across the board in the distribution of small business resources, in the distribution of housing resources that have affected communities of color. I think there was some cognizant effort to try and rectify some of that in this package.
Okay. Senator Hughes, I wanted to just go back because the area that is of deep concern for me, and I pray at night, is that we've had the moratorium here in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia when it comes to foreclosure, mortgage foreclosure, and renter eviction. What I am troubled by is when that gate opens, where are we? But let's just look at where we are now. Was there money in the bill for renter assistance and some type of renter help?
We calculated, working with, again, the guidance from the federal government and their program, we calculated $852 million in Pennsylvania for rental assistance. Okay, for rental assistance. That's not foreclosure assistance. That's not mortgage assistance. That's rental assistance. Okay, that's the calculation that we have. And again, I would just urge everyone as we walk through this. This was just done like a few days ago. All right, and so that's why, we salute Andrea, you and the Urban League for pulling this together so rapidly. But it may take a minute to get all of the real fine points pulled out. And quite frankly, we may want to wait till the new administration takes over and then let them put the fine points together to roll out how this money gets spent. That's me. That's just me. I'm just a little old state senator from West Philadelphia. That's just me. Okay.
That works for us.
Okay. So the unfortunate part, and we welcome those dollars. Those are seriously needed dollars. Those are going to help out a lot of folks. We now have to kind of complement that with support for mortgage foreclosure issues. Okay. Just as an aside, in the rental money, I believe 10% is of those funds are allowed to go for administrative purposes. I believe. Okay. Some percentage. So however it's decided that those dollars get released, whether it be to local counties and then out the door, whether it be to the state and then out the door, I'm not sure, but there is some admin money that's available so that, from what we can determine, so that organizations are get the appropriate support to build the capacity to drive these dollars out. Okay,
Perfect.
that's necessary.
Comment from either one of you on unemployment benefits to give us an update. So where did we land? We talked about, a higher amount that didn't land. So where are we when it comes to unemployment benefits in this bill?
Anuj, you want to hit that?
Sure. So there is an extension of the pandemic unemployment assistance program that started back in March. There is an extension of that through mid-March, and then there is an additional $300 a week that folks will be eligible for in applying as part of their unemployment compensation. That is slated right now to run through mid-March. And I apologize if I sound like a broken record, because I'm going to keep saying this. It's not enough, but it's something, and we'll have to build upon it. One of the key questions I think we'll have to look at is, and Senator, maybe you can give your thoughts on this, is whether the State Department of Labor and Industry is better prepared this time to process these claims. What we saw over the course of the summer and fall, and I'm sure the senator's office phone was ringing off the hook, we had people that applied, they lost their jobs in March and April, as millions of folks did. They did not get a response, if they were lucky, till July, August, September, because the system was not built to withstand that kind of volume. Now, with hindsight in view, I'm hopeful that the Commonwealth is better prepared to handle the surge that is likely coming in a few weeks.
Senator Hughes, I have to give you a compliment, and Tiffany, I know, is on the call. I referred several folks to your office on exactly what you just said, Anu, where it like the phone was ringing. It was almost like it was going into a black hole. And just want to thank his entire staff. Every individual that I gave them, they moved with a quickness within 24 hours and got back to those individuals and had an answer. I can't tell you how important that was. And Tiffany knows one of them was from one of my partners at Pfizer, one of the vice presidents there, and his daughter lost her job. He said, Andrea, we've been waiting for like 3 months. We've heard nothing. And his staff was immediate when it comes to the service and getting back to people. So Senator Hughes, thank you to your staff and to your leadership on that.
Thank you, Andrea. And thanks, good people, Tiffany and the squad, for just really staying on top, which is the case for most of our legislators. We're here on a call talking about how dollars are going to flow, and that's important. It's also important for folks to understand that, as we reach to these offices of legislators and elected officials and what have you, and make demands that are clearly appropriate, that folks understand that there's a human factor that exists, and most of the staff in these legislative offices, Tiffany's got a young daughter. Everybody's got family. They're trying to work through everything, in addition to the anxiety of COVID, and that's got a whole mental health piece that goes along with it. So to the extent that folks can operate in a fashion where we see this as we're all in this together is very, very important. Anuj talked to the fact that, and he's absolutely right. And so here's the irony of stuff, right? So it was a known fact that the state's unemployment compensation system, computer system, was outdated, hugely outdated, okay? Like Cobalt and flowcharts and stuff like that, kind of outdated, all right? And the system was scheduled pre-pandemic. The system was scheduled for a complete overhaul and update, I believe, in September of this year, of 2020. Millions were put aside. That was going to be the mission, what have you. And then, of course, the pandemic hits and the antiquated system was overrun with an unprecedented number of requests. And it was also overrun by incompetency at the federal level in terms of how the pandemic was managed, just generally. So it's kind of like the perfect storm coming together all at the same time. I think we're in a much better position when these dollars start to flow to get them out much more rapidly. We're talking about millions of requests. And you're always going to have a handful that don't get addressed for some particular issue. But I think we'll be in a much better position now that we've done a lot of the implementation of updating and upgrading the system, so that as these new dollars start to flow, we'll be able to get them out much more rapidly and respond to people's issues in a much quicker fashion.
Thank you. One of the areas that I'm very focused on here at the Urban League is education. Real advocate for better funding, especially in the school system here in Philadelphia with Dr. Height. It is not a secret that when you look at his funding per student, and I look at Marion, it's like twice, it's like 10,000 a student here and 20,000 over in Marion. When you look at our zip codes, the quality of your education depends on where you live. Many times in Philadelphia, the governor has promised to be an education governor. And in many ways, I'm disappointed with what we've done here in Philadelphia. We already had a system that is very strained. And then on top of that, with the COVID, I'm very concerned. So my question to you is, what is in the stimulus bill for education? What are we doing there?
Would you like me to address that, Andrea?
Yes, please.
So the money that this package includes is primarily to help school districts with the infrastructure costs and the PPE costs that the investments they'll have to make to frankly make their facilities safe enough for students and teachers to return. And the bottom line here is we can get all the testing and tracing and vaccine distribution. If we can't reopen our schools, we will have at best a limited economic reopening. How can we expect people to go back to work if they are trying to care for their children at home? The two simply don't work. So the dollars that are in this act are predominantly for school districts to make those kinds of investments. I don't have a breakdown yet of how much the Philadelphia School District will get from this. And then there is another $10 billion for for childcare centers, because just like schools, without our childcare system operating, functioning, and open safely, people will have a hard time going back to work. And by the way, who is one of the groups that this pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on is women. They are dropping out of the workforce at a pace that we have not seen in decades, primarily because of the childcare issue. And so if we don't have a childcare system that has capacity, is safe, and is functioning, we are going to see women in particular have a very hard time returning to work.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about
Anuj and Andrea. Anuj, I'm looking at numbers that says that the state of Pennsylvania may get $2 billion in K through 12 funding.
Okay.
All right. That's what I see. It doesn't have a breakout about how it's going to be distributed.
Okay.
But that's what I see. Okay. So you might want to check on that one, so to see how that's going to play itself out.
Yep.
Perfect.
All right.
I appreciate that. I just want to bring up a little bit on small business, and then maybe we can touch a little bit on nutrition or transportation if we have the time. Just to bring everybody's attention to it, and I know especially the small business that are on here today. I've got Keith Ellison, who's my director of entrepreneurship, who lived through this during CARES. I'm not going to just go and give you all the gory details, but we know that the intent of what was supposed to happen, the intent was good, the execution was horrible in what our small businesses and our African-American businesses had to go through in order to get the funding that they need through PPP. So in this $900 billion stimulus bill, $325 billion has been set aside for small business. Of that, about 285 will go to the SBA so that they can administer the first and second PPP forgiveness loans. 20 billion will go through the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And for those of you who are not familiar, that is for businesses that are in low income communities, with 12 billion also going to businesses in low income and minority businesses. And that's exactly what Senator Hughes talked about in the beginning, that it will go through the CDFIs because they are in the best position to be able to execute on that. So I'm very pleased with that. I just have a couple of things to tell our small business folks. And I can talk about it because I applied for a PPP. I got the PPP, and about 3 weeks ago, I was given forgiveness on my PPP. And I've helped plenty of other small business. I know the date for this, the date to apply for this money is March 31st. I'm going to ask all of our small businesses that we deal with to act like that date is next week. First come, first serve. We saw when that was put out there the last time, that money went very quickly. So I can tell you this week, I am putting my information together this week to apply for the second PPP, and you are able to do it. 2 things to make you eligible. You can have no less than 300 employees. That's number 1. And number 2, this is different than the CARES, is that you have to show that there is a 25% reduction in gross receipts from the first, second, third, or fourth quarter in 2020 relative to the same quarter in 2019. We didn't have to do that on the last one. So that's something new. So you must show 25% less in your revenue in your receipts. The other piece is the last go round, you were able to get up to 10 million, and you saw where it wasn't illegal what they did, but there were people who were terribly creative. If I had a large corporation, I could then say, well, I have corporation ABC that sits in Philly that has 150. So you saw a lot of large corporations, which that was not the intent, to get that money. So the cap on the fund this time, the fund will be $2 million. We're going to use the same criteria we used before. And I would say to folks, get your receipts together, get your information together over the next week or 2. Again, remember that 60% of what you're applying for has to be payroll. So that is your payroll and your fringe benefits. In addition to that, they're keeping the utilities. They're keeping in there also your rent or your mortgage. They have a new piece that's in there, and that's for those businesses that were terribly hurt and had personal damage during the I'll say rioting or looting. There is now a piece in there that will cover your property damage, and then there's some other pieces that deal with supplier costs and what they considered operation costs, like things like accounting, software, and cloud. So my message to all of the small businesses is run, don't walk, and make it happen. And any comments from either one of you on the PPP?
Hey, Andrea, this is going to be my closing comment because I've got to jump off in 2 minutes to jump on a Senate caucus Zoom around this issue of seating this member. What I think your comments are exactly correct and on point. I think that just if again, it's the old saying that my wife uses: if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. Okay, you know, have your stuff in order, get it together, work big plug for the CDFIs in Pennsylvania. They have organized themselves extremely well to work with small businesses and to work with businesses that don't have traditional banking relationships. Okay. And we would encourage you to connect with them. They're on this issue as much as they were on the issue of dealing with the small business grant program. So I would really encourage folks, and I want to thank the Congressman's office for working with our office and working with the CDFIs and the other institutions and recognizing the successes that we had in creating the small business grant program here in Pennsylvania. It's been replicated in other states around the country, and it appears that parts of those concepts have been picked up, I'm sure driven by the Congressman, and merged into this this program that we have that we're discussing in front of us. The specific fact that there's $12 billion going through CDFIs to get out to small businesses is a recognition of that, and an important recognition. And quite frankly, we're going to take the credit here in Pennsylvania, and you can tell Brother Morial that we're taking the credit for it. Okay.
I agree, Senator.
That's because we did such a very good job of bringing everybody together here in Pennsylvania. I'm gonna have to jump off because I'm getting.
Thank you so much. I sat in the room with those folks that had CDFIs in West Philadelphia, and they do yeoman's work. So thank you so much for joining.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thanks, Anuj. Look out for another email from me, man.
Thank you for everything.
Take care now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, so let's go. I have two more things, Anuj. So when you look at nutrition assistance, another area that breaks my heart sometimes. I had an opportunity this summer to feed 500,000 meals in just 2 months. In July and August, I was able to partner with Airmark, and I don't have to tell you, hunger is a pandemic in and of itself in the United States. And there are a lot of kids who go to sleep and wake up very hungry. What does this bill have in any way, anything on nutrition or anything on feeding?
Yes. So it does have another 13 billion, which is intended to increase the individual and household SNAP benefits, the Supplemental Nutrition Access Program, by 15%. And that is, that's heartening. It's not enough, certainly, to address the food lines that we are seeing in a way that we haven't seen since pictures of the Great Depression. Right. But let me say one thing on this, which is I'm hopeful about, and certainly the Congressman is a great advocate for addressing food insecurity. Yeah, I used to run the Reading Terminal Market, and we are the market is the largest redemption site for SNAP in the Commonwealth. So for a lot of low, moderate income Philadelphians, it's a critical source of fresh food. And if you look at the investment in SNAP, not just as a moral tool to address what should be a basic security, a basic right for people, it's also an economic development tool. The economic ripple impact of every dollar that is spent on SNAP goes right back into our local economy and supports jobs. These are for working people. These are for the butcher behind the counter. These are for the produce person who's stocking the oranges and the apples. And all of that money stays here locally because folks are buying the product locally. So there are estimates out there that if we simply increase SNAP on an annual basis from 30 to 40 billion, which may sound like a lot, but in the scheme of what we're talking about is not that much money. It could be enough to eradicate our hunger crisis, period. What I am hopeful for is that this package is simply a down payment towards getting to that goal.
Okay.
We need to see a sustained, long-term, greater investment in SNAP. And it will not only address hunger, but it will be an economic driver.
Got it. That's really helpful, extremely. I'm going to do one more thing, but I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to the business piece. Aletta asks, will these rules still apply for micro businesses? And then she said, from her understanding, no one that has less than 10 employees got it.
Is she referring to PPP?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So there is one of the heartening things I think about this package is in a bipartisan way, and there's not a lot of things that are bipartisan right now, but there was an approach to the small business relief provisions to learn lessons from the last 10 months and apply them. So let's take PPP, for example. This time, there is actually a set aside of the 285 billion. There's a portion of that that is dedicated just towards small businesses. In addition, with the money that's going through the CDFIs based on the model that the senator led here in Pennsylvania, the intention there is to reach those micro enterprises, businesses in communities of color or underserved communities that the traditional banking system does not reach. They don't have, these are unbanked communities, and the Bank of Americas and Citizens Bank, I'm not throwing critiques here right now, it's just a matter of fact, they do not have those relationships. The CDFI organizations do. So I think there is a much greater chance now for businesses that are truly in need, that have no other recourse, to reap some assistance from this package. Now, I would like to make a plug for our friends at the Enterprise Center, who have already launched a program. Adela calls it her PPP Readiness Program, and it's to help particularly small businesses and micro enterprises get everything in order now, such that when the window opens, and whatever day that ends up being, they are first in line. They are ready to apply that day. And I would fully recommend that any business or business network that needs that assistance reach out to the Enterprise Center and take advantage of the assistance they're offering.
And we're part of that that collaboration. It is the Asian Chamber of Commerce, the African American Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the Urban League are also part of that, because all of us are dealing with small businesses. And it absolutely, the number one thing to me, it says, get your stuff in order. Do not wait, and let us help you through that. So I would encourage all, you can come to us directly, come as a group together, but we absolutely are going to make a difference, because we have to have bigger accomplishments than what we had the last time. And I just read an article early this morning that came from the national president of the Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things that it was a whole article on what happened to Black businesses. This is a young Black man. And he said, one of the things is that when you look at the majority of Black owned business, it's a sole proprietor. There are not people that work. So many of them were not able to get loans. Many of them didn't have the relationship with the banks that they needed. They were shopping, and many of the banks refused them. So I do think that what both you and Senator Hughes has said about the CDFIs is a really good model to have that really helps African American and other businesses of color. I think it absolutely works. So I appreciate that. I have another question here, and it's in general. Is there a push to generate income by reminding taxpayers, this is good, to file state taxes? And if they are eligible for state forgiveness, then they can get a city refund.
That is an excellent point, and I frankly don't think that there is enough awareness towards that. In fact, the congressman had issued just before the holidays, and Andrea, if it's helpful to you, I'll send it. We put together a flyer of provisions in the CARES Act that are tax oriented, and it's only now that they are becoming relevant for businesses to take advantage of. One, for example, is in the past, if you had a loss on your tax return, you could carry forward a portion of that loss for a certain number of years. The CARES Act going into the future, the CARES Act had a provision that you can actually take that loss and apply it retroactively to prior year tax returns where you may have had a profit. And so if you were to say hypothetically, let me amend my 2018 return. I had a good year that year, but when I apply this loss from 2020, I'm going to show a loss in 2018, therefore a refund to me. Just like your point about the state taxes, there are some federal provisions that small business owners should take advantage of now.
Okay, that's excellent advice. Really good. I have another question, but before we go to the question, one of the areas is transportation. Was there funding in the stimulus bill for transportation? And then we'll move to another question.
There's $14 billion set aside for public transit agencies. Again, it is not, we have to be mindful of what SEPTA looks like when people start going back to work. And when we have reached some equilibrium of how many people actually go back to work on a daily basis versus working from home, or God forbid, they're still unemployed, has ridership still decreased to a level that SEPTA is in danger. This package is just a Band-Aid for the next couple of months. It doesn't address that underlying issue. So we're going to have to come back. We need a public transit system in this city. We need it to address economic disparities. We need it for mobility. And I think we're going to have to come back and revisit that question. One of your points at the beginning was what the Biden administration may do from the get-go. We are hopeful that the vice president is going to look at infrastructure as one of the top priorities. There was a very ambitious infrastructure package that passed the House this summer. It can be a model for the new White House to work from. And that will create not just short-term stimulus, again, but it will be long-standing investments in things that we need, whether it's schools, transit, roads, etc., that places like Philadelphia have been calling out for a long time.
Yes. Thank you. I have another question that just came in, and it's from Mary, and she asked, where do behavioral health providers fit in the vaccine schedule? Are we considered essential at any point?
I don't have an answer on that. I would have to research that and get back to you.
Okay, same thing here. Let's see. I had one other question. Oh, here it is. And we are almost at our time. It said, this is from Paul. And Paul said, how does this relief package and the previous one affect federal income taxes? So I believe he's talking about from an individual. And so I'm going to go out on the limb, Anu, but I'm going to ask you to please correct me. I thought that the money that you get from that is not taxable.
That's correct.
It won't count, it won't increase your tax. It's not going to decrease your tax. Almost look at it, and I'm going to use a bad word, use it as like almost like a tax credit, so to speak, but it's not going to incur any additional taxes for you. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think there was I'm not sure if the language of the CARES Act failed to address it, and so it created that uncertainty. But I remember we got a lot of calls during the summer about folks asking that very question: is this taxable or not? I believe, and we'll double check this, but I believe I read it last night that this stimulus package in fact corrected for that and very clearly said this is not taxable. In addition, for small businesses, the PPP money is not being treated as taxable, whereas the expenses that you sort of bill against the PPP money will still be deductible.
Right, right. Which I think is a really, that's great in there.
Yes, no, that's a nice win for small
So
businesses.
the money that you spent on the expenses of running your business through the PPP fund, you will be able to use that as a tax deduction.
Correct.
That's a good thing.
That's
Okay.
right.
We are at 5 o'clock. I am very conscious of time. First of all, Anu, thank you for stepping in. You were amazing. Thank you for being so clear. You shared a lot of information. Again, please thank Congressman Evans for voting on the bill. We appreciate it. We know how much work he did behind the scenes. He is a true advocate and a fighter for Pennsylvania and for Philadelphia. And for that, we are so grateful. I want to thank Senator Hughes, who is always out there getting into good trouble constantly. And he is a true trooper and someone that we look to for his leadership all the time. And I appreciate the work that he does and his staff. And so with that, I'm going to say good night. Thank you for everybody who took the time out of your busy schedule to be on here. We will probably have a part 2 to this. I got the impression that that won't be a bad idea. That might be a good idea. So thank you, and please stay safe. I appreciate it. So
Thank you,
so
Andrea.
much.
Thank you for all